So as of July of 2009, when I'm recording this video, the state of California is going through a major budget crisis. And you probably heard a lot about this on the news. The state is busy writing out IOUs in lieu of paychecks, and it's gotten pretty desperate. But I wanted to create a video that explains kind of how we got to this point, some of the underlying factors, and then some of the proposed solutions that are being tossed around right now to bridge the gap. So let's start with understanding how this happened. I mean, this is a very serious situation. We have $12 billion in current obligations, and it could rise to $40 billion over the next couple of years in state debt. So this is not something that's going away on its own. And I think ultimately it really boils down to the California Constitution, which is something that not very many people think about off the top of their head. But the fact is that you need a 2/3 majority in both the state assembly and Senate in order to pass a budget. And this includes raising any sort of tax. Now, 2/3 majority in any form of government is very difficult, especially in a two-party system where we have Democrats and Republicans disagreeing on a whole number of things. Getting 2/3 of people to agree on something is very hard, and especially when it comes to something like raising taxes. So as a result, California has not been able to raise taxes as quickly in order to meet certain costs, certain rises in costs. And those rises in costs have happened over the last 30 years as well. We've had increased costs in benefits, things like health insurance for state employees. There are a lot of state employees out there. And also just a generally broad expansion in public programs. The final major factor has actually happened fairly recently. We've had a decrease in tax revenues due to the credit crisis. And this is because unemployment has risen. A lot of people have lost their jobs, and they're not paying state taxes anymore as a result. And also, a lot of people have lost their homes due to the housing bubble. And this means that property taxes have gone down as well. So the government has seen a decrease in tax revenues on a few different fronts. People are also buying less, and this means that sales tax revenues have fallen as well. So as you can see, the state of California has kind of been hit by a number of decreases in tax revenues. So now that we understand some of the factors involved in creating the budget crisis, California Constitution, the rising costs for the government, and a decrease in tax revenues, let's now understand what are some of the proposed solutions. The first big thing that's being put on the table right now is a $14.8 billion revenue source from tax increases. I'm going to talk about some of the big tax increases. Probably the single biggest one would be an increase in sales tax of 1.5 cents to the dollar over 3 years. Now, this is quite significant. If you're paying an additional sales tax for 1.5 cents for every dollar that you spend, that's a major increase, and that in itself would lead to almost $10 billion in projected revenues. In addition to this, they are proposing some new sales taxes on things that are currently not taxed, things like amusement parks, golf courses, and other luxury goods. And finally, they're thinking about reducing the income tax credit for dependents. And this is a little bit more complex issue, but I think that it could potentially lead to savings of a couple of $1 billion. The second part of the plan involves issuing $10.3 billion in new debt. And this is divided up into two major groups. There are a couple of other small things, but the first major group is what's called revenue anticipation warrants. Basically, the government saying, okay, we are saying we're going to do all these tax increases and we're going to increase our potential revenues. And in return for that, we are going to raise cash right now from investors and back that debt up with revenue anticipation, the anticipated increase in revenue. So these securities will be called revenue anticipation warrants, and they'll give the state much needed cash right now. The other half of this equation is debt backed by future lottery earnings. So the state holds lotteries in order to raise money. That's one of the sources of revenue. And they're going to issue about $5 billion in debt that will be backed by lottery earnings in future years. Finally, the state of California has decided that they need to make some spending cuts as well, about $16.5 billion worth. These spending cuts are wide and varied, and I'm not going to be able to discuss all of them, but I do want to talk about a couple of the big ones. The single biggest line item there is actually $5 billion less for education. This is K through 12 education. And this is, in my opinion, kind of unfortunate, because I think that education is the future for this country, and it's sad that this is the area that we have to cut spending, but it is something that is proposed, put on the table right now. Another big cut, probably in a couple of $1 billion range, would be cuts on welfare and disability programs. Now, this is in the probably about $2 billion range, and it's going to be a wide variety of programs, but it's also something that you should probably know about. And then there's hundreds of millions of dollars cut from 50, 100 individual programs all around the state. And if you want to actually learn more about this, I recommend you check out the Wikipedia site on the California budget crisis, because they have a pretty good line item description of several of these cuts. So I hope this video has helped you understand the California budget crisis a little bit, and some of the reasons that it occurred, and some of the thoughts that are going on in terms of getting ourselves out of this mess. Thank you very much for watching, and for similar videos, please check out my website, www.kanjo.com.